Yeah, today we are joined by legendary coach Mike Schofield from the Naval Academy. He was at he was at the Naval Academy from 1982 to 2015, and he stopped coaching in 2013. So he was the head coach there for 30 plus years. He's been involved with USA Water Polo, the CWPA, the NCAA. He's also a USA Water Polo kind of Hall of Fame member and a CWPA Hall of Fame member. He was also a mentor to me as I was a young pup coach on the East Coast. Mike, how are you doing?
Great, Joe. Top of the morning to you.
Top of the morning. So how are you and your family with all the COVID stuff going on? Have you got out much since March?
Not as much as we'd like, which is probably what's been advised. We're doing fine. We have, everybody's healthy and just try not to get too much fatter and too much older. But there's enough to do around the house, and things have opened up a little bit in Maryland. So we got no complaints.
And so you still referee kind of on the East Coast and such. So when was the last time you were on the pool deck?
I was actually in Florida refereeing with Mike Naughton and Ted Bresnahan, the former Johns Hopkins coach. And Ted and Mike both live in Florida, and I've been refereeing in the winter down there the last few years. So my last game was March 12th with Coach Bresnahan.
There you go. That is an interesting combination right there.
Yep.
And for those that don't know, Ted Bresnahan used to coach at Johns Hopkins, and Mike obviously coached at the Naval Academy, and was it there just right down the street, and they were a bit of rivals there for a few years, or more than a few years. So here, just tell us a little bit of background on yourself, kind of where you played, and also specifically a little bit of the history of the Naval Academy water polo program.
Okay. I started playing in college, actually. I'd never really even touched a water polo ball till the summer after my freshman year in college. I was lifeguarding at the pool at the University of Pittsburgh. They had just gotten permission to start a varsity program in the fall of 1975. And there was a grad student from Puerto Rico by the name of Miguel Rivera. And he was also lifeguarding, and he was going to be the coach that fall. Built some goals. I helped him put them in the water after he got done making them. And he shot a few balls at me. I shot a few balls at him. And he actually played at San Jose State with Bruce Watson, who's the coach at San Jose State now. And Miguel encouraged me to come out for the team in the fall, which I did, and played for the next 4 years. And if anybody's interested, Michael Randazzo has done a bunch of probably 5 or 6 different articles for Swimming World magazine and Total Water Polo. He took a deep dive into the history of water polo in Pittsburgh earlier this summer, or earlier this spring. So I played 4 years at Pitt, and I got a degree in physical education and started coaching and teaching around Pittsburgh. So 1979 to 82, I was coaching a club swim team, coaching water polo and teaching. And I got offered a position at the Naval Academy after refereeing down there one spring, and turned it down about 4 times before Coach Lawrence, the aquatic director, finally caught me on a weak moment and talked me into taking the job.
So was the program already established, or did you establish the water polo program there?
Actually, if you want to go really far back, even before I was born, which is long enough, water polo at the Naval Academy was a big deal in the 30s. And they won there was no CWPA, there was no NCAA water polo championship. There was a national collegiate championship. And there are some plaques that we preserved and have displayed at Lejeune Hall that Navy was a national champion in water polo back in the 30s. And the coach was a gentleman by the name of Foster. And unfortunately, there was an incident where a midshipman lost an eye in a game. As those who go back that far would know, water polo back then was kind of like hand-to-hand combat, and people would literally be resuscitated in the midst of a game because they'd been underwater too long. And like I said, a midshipman lost an eye, so they discontinued the sport. It came back as a club sport, I think, in the 60s, 70s, early 80s. So they had a pretty decent club program, but built this brand new facility. Some of the parents of the club kids prevailed upon the athletic director to start a varsity team, which began in the fall of 82. That's a long answer to your question.
No, but you started in 1982 and you coached to 2013. And you must have some pretty good stories. For those that don't know, Navy was a power on the East Coast for years and years and years. Every year they were kind of vying for the Eastern Championship. But tell us a little bit about the early days there.
Well,
to get it going, the recruiting. Obviously you didn't start off just, I'm going to go win the NCAA championship, but.
Well, I didn't start off that way, and I didn't finish that way either. We never did win.
Okay.
I think the best we did was third at the NCAAs with a really good team. Not coincidentally, with a couple of really good players from Texas on that team, which I'm sure we'll get into.
And we're going to talk about that here in a couple minutes. So.
Yeah, the first couple of years were great because my first year there were guys on the team that were less than 2 years younger than me. I was 25, and we had a couple 22, 23-year-olds on the team. So that was how it started. By the time I got done, I was older than the players on the team's parents.
Okay.
So over time that evolves into being old and the kids being much younger. But it was great. I'll never forget the first practice that I was at. It was Labor Day weekend in the fall in September of 1982. And I actually had to go to boot camp in order to get this coaching job. So I had to enlist in the Navy, went to Great Lakes, Illinois, got beat up a little bit by all the drill instructors, and spent 7 weeks there. And so I show up Labor Day weekend, walk out onto the pool deck for the first workout, and there's 65 guys sitting there waiting to try out for the water polo team. So I knew that right away that numbers wasn't going to be a problem. I just had to find the ones that could play and find a way to tell the ones that couldn't that they should maybe find another sport. But 65 guys for your first practice, that's a good way to start.
Yeah, there you go. And he's being a bit humble here. He is a legendary coach. He was probably the best coach in the history of East Coast water polo. He was a mentor to me. He's been a mentor to coaches all around the country. I asked him ad nauseum. I was a coach that was that young coach, like in college. I was 23 years old whenever I got my first NCAA coaching job. And Mike kind of put up with all my questions. So, and over the years, you just kind of mentioned it. You've had a lot of success with some Texas kids. So, this was kind of from the beginning. So you had Texas kids from the 80s, 90s, and 2000s and beyond. So, yep. Is there something that you looked for in Texas kids, or was there some trait that they all kind of shared?
They were all great kids. They all put up with me, obviously, so they were willing to, put up with some grief. But even, from the beginning, they generally all had a really good swimming background, so they knew how to work hard. They didn't mind training. And, when you're from a sport outside of, or from a state outside of California, you kind of have a little bit of a chip on your shoulder, and you want to show that you can compete with kids that have been playing a little bit longer than you and maybe training at a little higher level. So it was great. In the 80s, and I apologize in advance if I miss anybody. Derek Wrighton was one of our first guys. His sister Brenda was a national team player for quite a few years. Scott Bell, Josh Bell, two brothers. Josh ended up being our team captain his senior year. And if you ever do a podcast with Josh, he can tell you what a terrible recruiting job I did for him. But He was our captain as a senior and is now a Navy doctor. doing great things. George Latour. I remember George introduced me to some whiskey called George Dickel whiskey. Don't ask me why I remember that, but and then Tim Tackle, whose sister married Todd Carlson, who was another one of our team captains.
There you go.
Tim actually ended up being a Navy SEAL, as did his brother-in-law Todd.
But like, so like a lot of those, Derek, Scott, and Josh were, kind of were from San Antonio, and
Yep.
then George and Tim were from Houston. So that kind of like back in the '80s, it was the San Antonio kind of dominated, just the Texas. And then the Houston teams kind of started coming up in the late '80s and.
Yeah. I just remember anything having to do with Texas water polo originated with one of the Yates brothers, and there's about 100 of them.
It's Jim Yates, the one down in Texas. Jim Yates, the one down in Texas. Well,
And he was a real good guy, and I actually played against him. I don't know if he's retired, probably long retired now, but I remember.
No. Jim, okay, a funny story about Jim Yates, and for all those from Texas here. After I graduated from college, and right before I went to the Merchant Marine Academy, I moved back to Houston or to San Antonio and worked there for a year. And Jim Yates was out of the sport for about 7 years. And I just saw him at a local pool because I went there to go swim. And I said, "Hey, Jim, I just started the San Antonio Water Polo Club back up." And he goes, "Oh, okay, I'll come out." And then he came out. This is like, kind of, we didn't have the flags. He was all confused. He didn't know kind of what was going on. A month later, I got the job at the Merchant Marine Academy and left.
Oh, wow.
and I said, "Jim, it's your club now." And it's been going ever since the late '90s. and he's still playing. I think he's probably in his late 60s, and he's still playing. And every year or every he goes to Masters Nationals and World Masters, and he's probably the most in shape person in the pool.
Yeah, no, he was a legitimate athlete, and still is. Hey, go back to the Merchant Marine Academy, and you can tell me and your audience how many teams have beaten the likes of the United States Air Force Academy that were represented in the Merchant Marine Academy before and after you were there?
None.
Okay, except for the water polo team when you were there.
Yes, so we were the only team sport in the history of the Merchant Marine Academy to beat the Air Force Academy in a team sport ever. Yes, that was my last year. That is my one claim to fame at the Merchant Marine Academy. So,
and I believe I was there, and I believe it was not a fluke.
Yes, and we won by about 3 or 4 goals, so it wasn't like a last-second thing or something like that. Yes, yep. That was 2000. That was the fall of 2002. That was the fall before I moved to Houston. So
there you go. That was quite an accomplishment.
Back to some of the players. Back to where we are. Yeah. So now, as far as like any good stories from like Scott or Josh, kind of why they were there, or Derek or George. Yeah, besides the whiskey stories.
Yeah, well, I mean, we recruited all those guys. I actually met Tim Tackle when he came to our camp while he was in high school. And he was really, really hot to trot on coming to the Naval Academy. And I took a liking to him. He was a hardworking guy. And he ended up going to, I want to say, the Hill School up in Pottstown, Pennsylvania, where they have a foundation program at the Naval Academy where you can go to a 13th grade for a year and maybe get your academics a little more further along and take some more chemistry and some math. So he did a year at prep school and then came in and started as a plebe. So I remember meeting him at camp. The other guys, I think we recruited out of high school, and probably Yates was the guy that turned me on to all of them.
Yeah. And just to I don't know if the camps, obviously the camp's not going on this year, but I think the Navy camps have continued throughout the years. And Mike was very generous with, he accepted kids from everywhere, and coaches. If you wanted to coach and then you wanted to help out and learn, every opportunity in the world to go there. And I thank you for letting me be on the pool deck and being part of those early on up there too. But now let's get into the 2000s kind of a little bit. So we got, we have Aaron Recco and Jordan Gentry and Tyler Hill and Mark Malik and Stevie Ray. So thoughts on?
Yeah, I lost you there. I'm sorry, Joe. Somehow I lost you there for a couple minutes, but.
All right, so now into the 2000s, we had a little technical difficulty there. We had you have Aaron Recco and kind of Jordan Gentry and Tyler Hill and Mark Malik and Stevie Ray. Again, we apologize if we're leaving anybody out. I'm sure there's a couple guys that came there, they may not have been like kind of lasted all 4 years, but those are like the highlights from like the Texas kids.
Yep.
And I think Aaron was probably the best one of the bunch, right?
Yes. All you have to do is ask him, and he will do for you. But yeah, he was probably one of the top 3 or 4 players that's ever played here from any state. I think there's only been 2 or 3 players in the history of the CWPA who were the MVP at Easterns twice. And Aaron was the MVP his junior and senior year at Easterns, and legitimately so. He was a talented player.
And then like him and Jordan Gentry came from San Antonio, where water polo wasn't the biggest sport in the world at that point. Right. But they were just good athletes and good swimmers. And let's just say they weren't probably dominant their first year or 2, but they became dominant after that, correct?
Yes. Jordan ended up as our team captain, and I want to say as a jet pilot. I think he's still involved, still active. But he could do it all. Play defense, drive, shoot, counter. He was a really, really good player. Defensively, Tyler Hill and Mark Malik did some things that we really needed, and not too many people could do them as well as those 2 guys. And Stevie Ray was just a man-child.
I laugh because I've talked to Stevie a little bit. Stevie's still involved a little bit at the pool too, right?
Well, he just moved up to Newport, Rhode Island.
Okay.
In the winter, I think in December, he detached, and he is in school up in Newport. And then he's going to report to the Michael Murphy in Hawaii, maybe this fall, I believe.
That's not a bad assignment.
No. He's one of my favorite people. Stevie and I did not hit it off 100 times out of 100, but as his dad so famously told me one time, Stevie doesn't care if you're screaming at him or telling him how great he is. He just wants you to pay attention.
Yes. I actually coached his older brother at the Merchant Marine Academy, Justin Ray.
Uh-huh.
So Justin was definitely not the same size as Stevie, but you got Stevie. For those that don't know, Stevie played at Baytown Sterling. He was part of that 2007 Baytown team that was voted the best team in Texas history back in April. And he grew into, like, he was a short little pudgy kid his freshman, sophomore year of high school. Then he just grew like 3 feet or something, and in both directions. And he came to you, and he was like a raw piece of just athlete, and you just kind of shaped him into something. And I know you probably had to help him stay the course a little bit. So.
Yeah, but he was a lot of fun, and I've enjoyed being around him ever since.
Yeah, so he always has a smile kind of on his face, but he was a lot of fun for me to coach. So I can't imagine at the Naval Academy. So there you go.
Yeah, he's one of those people that even if you're mad at him, you can't stay mad. and I'm sure he can't stay mad either.
And I'm sure you went through that little cycle a few times. So
absolutely.
Each practice probably.
Yep.
And then, yep. And then in the 2010s, you had kind of a hand in of a few Texas kind of athletes kind of coming through the system. You had Robert Sutherland, and you had Brendan Metcalf, and you had Jared Castillo. Francis Kim was also there at yep. the tail end, kind of a little bit. Yep. So kind of tell us about those guys.
Well, Robert was the one that I coached the most, because I think I stopped coaching when he was a sophomore, and he was just a big, strong center defender who had ridiculously strong legs and did a great job for us. Brendan was a freshman when I stopped coaching, ended up playing a ton for Mladen when he took over, and did a really good job. Jared I knew of because you had kind of turned me on to him as a recruit. But he came in the year after I finished coaching, as did Francis, the goaltender.
Yeah.
And ironically, Jared has been engaged to Louis Nicolau's daughter, Madison, for quite some time. The wedding was supposed to happen in April, but because of the Defense Department travel restrictions and the whole virus thing, they're still on their learner's permit, and I'm not sure if the wedding's going to happen. We're just not sure when.
And for those that don't know, Louis Nicolau is the current head coach at the Naval Academy.
Yes.
And
yes.
a former player there back in the 80s and 90s.
Yeah. Yes. And as Kelly Nicolau, Louis's wife, the whole like mother, like daughter thing. Kelly married a Hispanic, slightly chubby Navy water polo player. So Madison held out until she found one as well.
Slightly taller, though. Slightly taller. So there you go.
Well, that Louis is not going to want to hear that. But it's true.
But it's how big you play in the water, right? And,
that's right. And
was
they
it?
both played very well.
But I know as a club coach here, I would send kids to you as much as I possibly could, and they all seem to have a great experience. I mean, it was the love-hate relationship, right? A little bit during like just a coach in college. There's to be a little bit of love-hate, but then a coach in college at a service academy is even a little bit different. So, I appreciate all the opportunities that you gave to Texas athletes. I mean, let's do a little kind of a infomercial for the academies, kind of a little bit. The athletes that go there, just tell us a little bit about the opportunities that they get if they want to go and play water polo either at Air Force or Navy and such like that. So,
right. Well, before we get into that, I will proudly say that every single one of those guys who we mentioned graduated and is serving or did their 5 years or more in the military, and that's one of the best things that I can take from the whole experience was the graduation rate of the water polo players was extremely high. So I just kind of made sure that I didn't go too far in my craziness that guys were quitting and leaving and trying to get away. The graduation rate was something that the school is very proud of generally, and as a water polo coach, I wanted to be a part of that.
And I've talked to quite a few of these guys, and they all say the same thing. Mike's a hard coach. I may not have liked it at the time, but I understand now, and I respect it, and I have a great relationship with them. So you were a huge positive kind of influence on a ton of kids, not just the Texas kids, but a ton of kids. So.
Or you can say they were successful in spite of me, which may apply to some of them too.
There you go. But one of my favorite things being on the pool deck, kind of with you, is you were talking about, whenever you granted me access to just kind of sit there and watch practice, were the Schoisms. So my favorite Schoism ever. This was during a game, and your team was on offense. The ball got turned over. The other team countered and scored. And you just put your hands up, kind of how you do, and you said, "A good pass to a bad player is still a bad pass."
Guilty.
What was that?
Guilty.
Yes. And was it and I just still remember it, and I still use that, not to my kids. That's just something that we share amongst coaches now. But it's one of those things where that's always stuck. So do you have any favorite Schoisms that you can bring back now?
Well, a more polite way to put that situation that you hear a lot of people use now is, yes, you were open for a reason.
There you go. But I just, I mean, but that particular one is like, you're saying this, you're insulting the guy that made the pass, but then the guy that received the pass is just over there going, "Oh my God." You want me to come out too? But that's probably also the guy that didn't get back on defense too. So there
I
you go.
don't know. I don't know.
No, but I mean, so for kids that are looking at the Naval Academy or even the Air Force Academy, so just kind of tell us what that opportunity would, yeah, kind of would present to them.
Sure. I think all of the service academies, regardless of sports, are, Louis likes to tell kids, you got a chance to get the golden ticket. Air Force, West Point, Navy, the Coast Guard Academy. We have a close friend whose son just graduated from there and was the captain of the basketball team. Merchant Marine Academy. Those places, regardless of which specific school, you're set for life. I mean, you get an education, you get challenged, you're going to get up early, you're going to work late, so you're going to be a perfect employee wherever you end up because you've been asked to do a little more than most. Not to mention, you get a paycheck, you get tuition, you get rooms, you get meals, and you get hired for at least 5 years after you graduate, and most of them stick around a lot longer than that. So, I mean, it's a full scholarship with probably more than a full load of work that you're asked to contribute in return. But, I could go for hours talking about what some of our graduates are doing now and continue to do in every aspect of life that you could imagine. Just an incredible opportunity, and I would recommend it.
And we talked before we got on about Spencer Shelley, who's a North Texas kid he's a freshman. He's up there now. He's been there for like about a week or so. And
Yep.
And I hope he's the kind of one of the next great Texas kids that is going to be going. Yeah, that's going to go through the program. So
Yeah, the freshmen, or plebes as they are called, all checked in last week, and they're going through a plebe summer like no other because it's in the middle of the virus, the COVID thing. There's all sorts of precautions being taken, all sorts of limitations on what they can and can't do. So it'll be a learning experience with lots of lessons learned when they come out of it.
yeah, it's going to be very unique to them, and they're going to have their own stories that is going to be a little bit different than all the other graduates. So
yeah, there's about 175 years of how to run plebe summer playbooks that kind of got thrown out for this summer because most of what they used to be able to do, they can't. And so everybody's kind of flying blind as to how to go through this next 6 weeks with the plebes.
I am sure the Navy has found a way, and they will get the job done somehow, right?
I hope so.
But what about, I mean, obviously you weren't just at the Naval Academy. You've been involved at all levels, the USA Water Polo, the CBPA, the NCAA. Tell us your overall thoughts about the current state of water polo in our country. So
I think lots to feel good about, lots to look forward to, a lot of accomplishments that hopefully will continue to be made. I think, though, generally there needs to be a more formal, for lack of a better word or lack of a better phrase, it would be great for water polo in this country if there were a more formal affirmative action program. And I don't mean to equate the opportunities in water polo to what's going on in the big picture racially and culturally here. Totally different. But the ability to work your way up the pipeline as a national team candidate or potential player is so skewed if you live in Southern California, and a little bit less skewed if you live in Northern California. But there's 49 other states where it's going to cost you and your family tens, 20s of thousands of dollars just to keep yourself in the pipeline competitively. So I think finding opportunities to save a spot or two on an international trip for a youth team, a cadet team, a junior team. Not that we're going to give spots away, but you got to identify people out of state who show the kind of potential and have the kind of program that they can be part of to work their way into the national team. Ashley Johnson is an outlier, of course, in terms of what she's done as an Olympian, but I still don't believe we've had a male athlete other than Chris Duplanty, who was from Hawaii and played at Irvine. I don't think we've had a male athlete who went to college outside of California or Hawaii, in Chris's case, in 50 years, maybe 60 years. So obviously what we're doing hasn't produced any sort of a cross-section of athletes from outside of California. Again, some sort of a quota system with the required work and investment on the part of those athletes and their coaches, it would go a long way towards changing that. Yeah. I think it's also pretty clear to me that, let's say a hypothetical situation where these two very athletic twins are born, and for whatever reason, one of them goes to Orange County and the other one lives in Minnesota. Even if those two kids both play water polo all through their formative years, if one's playing at a school in Orange County that takes it seriously and the kid in Minnesota plays, the competitive and training opportunities are so different. And I think it applies at the college level as well. If you want to get a guy on a national team outside of California, you've got to provide the same training and competition structure and commitment level that is more common in California, obviously, than it is most other places.
And I mean, and that's something that we're trying to change here in Texas, as far as, the opportunities to play and compete. I mean, you've been to Texas kind of a few times, kind of over the years. Kind of what is your outside perspective of Texas water polo?
Well, we just went through a whole list of guys that we wouldn't have been very successful had it not been for their contributions. Again, like I said, good swimming background, good work ethic, chip on their shoulder, and you don't mess with Texas. that's how they like to present themselves, and that was one of the places that we found some really, really good athletes, and with your efforts to get this up to a state-sponsored sport, I think you told me there's 150 high schools playing now.
Yep.
That's only going to get better.
Yeah.
And men and women, boys and girls. It's going to be a lot more coaches coming to Texas to recruit. I'm sure.
Yeah, I mean, we are seeing a ton of college coaches. We were even going to have a college combine here this past or this summer. It just didn't work out. But I mean, it's just growing. It's not going to happen just like that. I mean, the California groups, they had a state-sponsored sport as a high school program in 1960.
Right.
Ours is starting in the fall of 2021.
Right.
It's I mean, there's been a lot of growth and a lot of effort, but we've come a long way, but there's so much more to do. And it's not just in Texas. It's a lot. It's anywhere outside of California. There's a ton to do. And and I'm looking forward to it. And you mentioned kind of diversity. I mean, thoughts on the current movement to have a little bit more of diversity and inclusion, kind of within the sport, as far as kind of some people that might be a little bit more kind of disadvantaged, either economically or socially, and stuff like that. Thoughts on some challenges, some solutions to just get them started, even the grassroots level.
Right. Well, going back to what we talked about before we went on air here, when you spoke about taking 11 teams from Texas to the Junior Olympics not long ago, I mean, all you have to do is the math, plane tickets, hotels, entry fees, food, transportation, rental vehicles, etc. You take 11 teams from Orange County to play in the Junior Olympics in Orange County, your price tag's pretty reasonable. But if you take them from Texas or Connecticut or Maryland or Chicago, we're talking about a completely different economic model. So, outreach into areas where maybe there is good aquatics, there's good facilities, perhaps minority communities. I mean, I've always kind of fantasized about coaching at an inner city school that has ridiculously good basketball, and just making friends with the basketball coaches and asking them to maybe tell me the 3 or 4 best kids that they cut
Yeah.
from the basketball team, and start in 8th grade or 6th grade or whatever, and say, hey, I see you didn't make the basketball team, but how about come on over here to the pool and let's see what we can do in the water polo world. And there's some amazing athletes out there who might not be good enough to play basketball at DeMatha, or football at a place like Good Counsel, which are the 2 big private schools around here. But man, some of those kids could do some damage in water polo.
Oh yeah, the backup power forwards, the backup tight ends. Like those kids that just didn't make the cut. They just moved in. They didn't get to play. I mean, that's one of the driving forces here in Texas is, coach, like, how am I going to get kids? I go, this is what you got to do. Start with the swim team, sure, but then go out and recruit. Go and talk to those coaches and get those kids that were cut. The volleyball girls, the softball girls. These, people that understand team sports to a certain extent, and then you can teach them how to swim.
Yep.
Because I would much rather have, and this has changed over the years, I'd much rather have a team full of football players and teach them how to swim than a team full of swimmers and then teach them how to pass.
Right.
So, right. I mean, it's definitely a challenge, and I'm looking forward to just like kind of the next steps here in Texas. Now you're on the pool deck as a referee, and as you know, we have all these sorts of referee rules, and we have the high school rules, the NCAA rules, and the USA Water Polo rules, and the FINA rules. This is the first time, although we can't use them right now, this is the first time that all of the rules are the same for the most part.
That's a good thing, for sure. Yep.
It's going to make it a lot easier for the referees on the pool deck, the coaches on the pool deck. But has that ever happened in your coaching career?
I don't think to this degree. No, there have been some times when it was very, very similar. There were a couple minor differences, but this is the most uniform or unified situation that I can think of. And, it'll make it a lot easier for the officials. You won't have to worry about transitioning from one set of rules to another. The players won't have to second guess what they're doing or what they can and can't do. I think it'll be good. And I think that the rules that have changed, they were changed for the right reasons. They're going to promote some more offense. They're going to be a little more understandable, I think, once people get used to it. Yeah. But going back to getting kids to recruiting kids to play water polo, the great thing about the sport is once you lead the horse to water, so to speak, they like drinking it. There's not a lot of downside to playing a sport like water polo. It's, you have contact, you have goals, you have defense, you're with a team.
Yeah, you have to be fit, and you can play.
It's a really fun sport to play.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, I'm looking forward to it. Mike, thank you so much for coming on and doing this kind of with us today. This is going to be posted at the txwaterpolo.com website as part of our podcast, and it's also going to be a separate podcast as well. But Mike, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Joe, you're quite welcome. It's a pleasure spending time with you, and keep all the great work that you're doing going. And thanks to all those Texas guys that came to Navy and made me look good.
All right. Thanks, Mike.
Thanks, Joe.